Hey guys, this is just going to be a very brief video where I talk a little bit about Ursula Le Guin. Um, the book you guys have read for this week and for the class is Left Hand of Darkness. It's the story of Genli I, sent from Ecumen to convince the inhabitants of Gethen to join this confederation, right? He's all alone, and the book is partly a story of his efforts to understand the culture of the place that he's come to. He's a figure very much like a guy named Branislaw Malinowski, who is often thought of as the person who originated ethnographic fieldwork. Back in 1914, Malinowski was dropped off by a ship on an island in what's today Papua New Guinea. Was confused by what he saw around him and was plunged into political intrigue in the midst of a colonial situation. And that's very much how we think about many of the early days of anthropology. I'm going to leave it to you all to discuss this in your discussion section or when we meet, but clearly the book touches on all kinds of themes from anthropology. In addition to Genli I's ethnographic journey and the forms of cultural learning he does and the colonial context, there's the whole issue of sex and gender on Gethen, as well as questions about the social structure of Karhid or Karhide and Orgoyen. These are unstable states that are in a process of rapid transformation, brought about in part by the same forces that brought Genli I there in the first place. So, how did Ursula Le Guin, come to write this interplanetary ethnography? Is it just a coincidence? It's not really a coincidence. In fact, Le Guin, who died in January of 2018, was the daughter of Alfred and Theodora Kroeber, who were two pretty famous anthropologists. This is Alfred pictured on the left here. Alfred Kroeber is particularly well known. He was the first student to complete a PhD with Franz Boas at Columbia University. Who was Boas, we've already talked about a little bit in terms of his ideas about what culture was. And Kroeber was hired to establish the anthropology department at the University of California, Berkeley, and it remains one of the leading anthropology departments in the country today. Le Guin's mother, Theodora, was a popular writer as well as an anthropologist, and one of her best-known books was a book called Ishi in Two Worlds. This is a book about a guy named Ishi, who was the last known member of the Yahi tribe of California. The rest of the Yahi had been killed in a massacre by white settlers. Both Kroebers worked with Ishi, and this is a picture of Ishi here. This is a very complicated topic, and there's much to discuss here. We don't want to have time to sort of get into the politics of Ishi and the Kroebers' relationship to him, but I want to emphasize, though, that this form of encounter between the Kroebers and Ishi greatly informed Le Guin's work. In the 1930s and 1940s, when Le Guin was a child and a teenager, the Kroebers were working with people from the Tohono O'odham people of the Sonoran Desert and Yurok people in what is now Humboldt County. And these interlocutors, these informants, would come and go from the Kroeber's ranch in Napa Valley. And this was a place where Le Guin spent her childhood. So she knew these folks. She would later recall these daily experiences with the people she called her Indian uncles. She recalled that they gave her, quote, a sense that nothing and no one is irredeemably foreign, alien, or other. Speaking several years back, Le Guin noted that her memories of these two Native American friends are hedged with caution and thorned with fear, because she knew almost nothing about their personal history and political condition. She recognized that they held far different views of things of things that might seem quite ordinary to you and me, and she observed that time itself was different for them. These experiences, she suggested, were in some ways the soil from which the cultural relativism of my fictions would grow and flourish. And I think that mention of the term cultural relativism is particularly relevant. Okay, let's move on to the next slide here. One final comment on how Le Guin came to be the writer that she was. And here I'm drawing on a really nice essay written about her by the anthropologist Anand Pandian. Her father, Kroeber, was a certain sort of anthropologist. Conducting research in the American West during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Kroeber's subject was very much the wrecks of cultures on the frontiers of the American West. Le Guin grew up in this environment and saw her father's work both as an act of imperialism and as an act of human solidarity. And that continues to be the legacy of anthropology, one that we've discussed a little bit and is very much a notable feature of how we have to think about anthropology. On the one hand, it is a discipline born of the frontier and of imperialism, and on the other, anthropologists themselves have often been the only members of imperial societies who were interested to listen to what the victims of colonial practices, colonialism, had to say, to value other cultures, and to take seriously the forms of knowledge held by marginalized people. Very much aware of this, Le Guin described herself as a granddaughter of the American frontier, and she described her own writing as an effort to listen to the voices from the other side. And I think that that is the kind of approach to learning about others that shows up in The Left Hand of Darkness. I just would urge you then to check out her work, check out some of the writing about her. There's been some lovely essays in the New York Times. The anthropology sort of magazine, Sapiens, has a fantastic write-up of her. Same thing with some of the blog posts that showed up around 2018 when she passed away. She's had some really interesting things to say and has been she's been a great commentator on American life, in addition to being an incredible writer. So I hope you've enjoyed the experience of reading her work and of learning a little bit about her, and there's much left to discuss there.